Hello. It's an important day. It's Independence Day. I'm Dr. Scott Jensen, and I want to talk about my perspective on Independence Day and how we got here. I want to emphasize the importance that Independence Day really is here because people were willing to get into the arena and put their lives on the line. Over the last couple of days, the Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Joe Biden. And after spending an hour or so with him with a bunch of other Democratic governors, Tim Walz came out and basically told Americans that President Biden is fit for office and that Democrat governors have his back. He speaks of having a bad debate as being simply that. I want to ask the question, on what basis does someone like Tim Walz make an assessment of someone's cognitive abilities? I have treated hundreds of patients with dementia in my life, and I'm not making a diagnosis here of someone who I have not evaluated, but I know what goes into it. I know that I learn about a person's cognitive status by asking questions, and with what I see and what I hear, I know that I do lab tests and I may do MRIs, and I know frequently the diagnosis of dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's type or Pick's type or Lewy body types or multi-infarction cause. It's a tough, challenging diagnosis to receive both as a patient and as a family. But we do surveys, and frequently when we nail down the diagnosis, we're usually looking at sort of a 95 percentile confidence level, but it isn't a perfect diagnostic algorithm, if you will. And there's no one lab test that we can do that says, aha, you've got dementia. Surveys can be helpful, and certainly cognitive surveys can be helpful in determining a progress. Unfortunately, our medications are marginally effective and frequently cause side effects that are oftentimes so intense that they can literally push people into a nursing home facility sooner than they might otherwise have to go. I'm thinking of a patient that I saw recently with dementia and the meeting I had with him and his family. I don't do a lot of empty cheerleading in those situations. We have a candid conversation and we talk about, is the person safe to use the appliances in the kitchen regarding stove and oven and microwave, even other appliances in the house that could be representative of a danger to that person. We talk about whether or not the car keys should be removed. We talk about, does a person have the ability to read a map, or are they getting lost? Are they trying to go to the grocery store, but they ended up 10 miles away at their daughter's place? Things like that. But the empty rhetoric of cheerleading and saying that this person's fit for office and this person is going to have such and such person's back seems to me like empty rhetoric. Let me just share with you some of the data that Mayo Clinic puts on their website and references dementia. Mild dementia, according to Mayo Clinic articles written by the Mayo Clinic staff. It says mild dementia, what you'll see is memory loss, hard time remembering newly learned information, changes in personality, people may become subdued or withdrawn, trouble organizing and expressing thoughts, and individuals have increased trouble finding their way around, even in familiar places. That's mild dementia. And dementia has progressive stages, mild, moderate, and severe. Typically, we expect people from the time of symptom appearance and diagnosis to the time of death to be somewhere between 3 and 10 years. I usually find for my patients, it's usually 5 to 7 years. But here's moderate dementia due to Alzheimer's, according to Mayo Clinic. People may grow more confused and forgetful, need more help with daily activities and self-care. They show increasingly poor judgment. They lose track of where they are. They may confuse family members and close friends with one another or mistake strangers for family. They may wander, unsafe to leave on their own. Greater trouble with memory loss. People may forget details of their personal history. They repeat favorite stories or make up stories to fill gaps in their memory. People in this stage may also need assistance with grooming. They undergo significant changes in personality and behavior. They develop unfounded suspicions. Individuals often grow restless or agitated, especially late in the day. I know for my patients that I've taken care of, oftentimes sleep disturbance is a significant part of moderate dementia. And then Mayo Clinic says this about severe dementia. Disease has a growing impact on movement and physical capabilities. People lose the ability to communicate. Individuals can no longer speak in ways that make sense. Experience a decline in physical abilities. Muscles may become rigid. And then Mayo Clinic goes on to say that on average, people with Alzheimer's disease live between 3 and 11 years after diagnosis. And I think that's consistent with my own experience. When we talk about Alzheimer's disease or dementia, we're talking about memory, thinking, judgment, language, problem solving, personality, and movement. So what does the New York Times say about Joe Biden in regards to the recent debate and the other concerns that have popped up along the way? They say this in an article recently written by in the New York Times by Nate Cohn. He says, the share of voters who said Mr. Biden is just too old to be an effective president rose 5 points to 74%. So 74% say he's too old to be effective, but only 36% said that in 2020. And yet, from what rhetoric we're hearing from Tim Walz, he seems to be willing to ignore that, saying he had a bad night on the debate battlefield, and so there should be no problem. Tim Walz has got his back, and Joe Biden is fit for office. But that's not what Angie Craig is saying. Congresswoman Angie Craig is saying that in order for her to feel better, she needs to see Joe Biden out there campaigning, giving impromptu speeches, taking questions, doing interviews, doing more than simply reading teleprompters. She wants a real live candidate doing what candidates do, campaign with the everyday people, not hiding from them. Other leading Democrats as well as Republicans have said similar things. Even Nancy Pelosi has made the comment that it's a legitimate question to ask whether or not what happened in front of the nation at the debate last week was, if you will, a moment or an episode, or more representative of a condition. I think that's a legitimate question coming from Nancy Pelosi. And I think we could also look at what Thomas Friedman has said. Thomas Friedman is arguably or reportedly Joe Biden's favorite New York Times columnist. And he comes out a couple days ago with an article, The Question President Biden Needs to Ask Himself Now. Now, Thomas Friedman is not diagnosing Joe Biden, and neither am I. But the world saw what it saw. And Tim Walz and nobody else can erase that, nor should they try. But this is what Thomas Friedman says. At this moment of incredible importance for America, I would urge President Biden, his family, and his party's leadership to ask the question, what does your worst enemy, Donald Trump, want you to do now? Then do the opposite. And what does Thomas Friedman say? He says, Biden's incoherent responses in last week's debate causes the potential for ads to appear asking this question. Is this the man you want answering the phone at 3 a.m. if the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians attack us? That's what Thomas Friedman asks. And for his answer, he turns to the musical Hamilton. And this is what Friedman says. He quotes a piece of dialogue from the play Hamilton. George Washington says, I'm stepping down. I'm not running for president. Alexander Hamilton says, I'm sorry, what? Washington comes back. One last time, relax. Have a drink with me. one last time. Let's take a break tonight, and then we'll teach them how to say goodbye. And then Thomas Friedman says, yes, what Trump fears most right now is that Biden will teach the country how to say goodbye. That's what Thomas Friedman is saying. Frankly, friends, it disturbs me that such raw partisan rhetoric will sort of rule the day. It's Independence Day, and everyday Americans know that this day demanded a price in the past, it demands a price today, and it will always demand a price. In 1964, Ronald Reagan gave a speech called A Time for Choosing, and in it, he used these words: whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. Friends, it is everyday citizens like you and I that will choose and determine the path for America. It has to be this way. We cannot leave it to the elites. We cannot leave it to the people who fly into Washington, D.C. and spend an hour with the president after an absolutely dismal, failed debate performance on top of many other gaffes and evidences of significant cognitive decline. We cannot let those elites tell us that those things don't matter. We're up to the task. And that is why we celebrate Independence Day today, because Americans have been up to the task, past, present, and I pray in the future. As for Tim Walz, I don't know with what credentials you use that you make a diagnosis that Joe Biden is fit for office. But I know this. There are many everyday Americans, some of them with impressive credentials, some of them with impressive experiences, thinking other than you do. God bless America, and have a satisfying, thoughtful, reflective Independence Day. Scott Jensen.